Got Milk campaign, totally created by the Dairy Farmers Association of America. Milk, questionable in its health benefits, actually, right?
I don't even know if it's questionable at this point.
It's a little sus.
It like helps your bones a little and murders you in every other way.
Yeah, it's really not good for you. And like most of us are lactose intolerant, you know, like if you look back at those ads are bananas because they have professional athletes standing there like, after I get, like, fam, you ain't working out and then drinking a glass of milk. That is disgusting. That is nasty.
It was literally the Gatorade commercials with milk instead of Gatorade.
Y'all are not, you a whole lie. Come on now.
Boom, 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 boom. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another phenomenal episode of My Mama Told Me, the podcast where we unpack, we dive deep into the world of Black conspiracy theories, and we finally work to prove that Mr. T did not cut his hair into that mohawk. The nigga just couldn't grow hair between his sideburns and that landing strip in the middle. He had a rare form of alopecia. It's called almost alopecia, and the man has been crying out for help all these years. Help Mr. T, everyone, please. I'm your host, Langston Kerman. I'm delighted to be here. I'm doing well. I'm pretty much just eating snacks and enjoying myself while the world burns. It's the way I plan to live. I'm just going to die in the apocalypse real silly. That's my plan. My guest today, she's wonderful. I imagine she's going to do a lot of cool things before the apocalypse comes. Much more substantial than eating snacks and just letting things burn around her. She's amazing. She's a poet. She's a writer. She's an important thinker out in the world. You know her from her book, Electric Arches. You know her from her work on Ironheart. She fucking is writing cool-ass comic books. She's amazing. Please give it up for my guest, Miss Eve Ewing.
Yes.
We're excited. You got on a Goosebumps shirt, and I think that's very fitting to the conspiracy theory that you sort of brought to us.
Yes, absolutely.
That I think is really important, and it hit home for me in a way, a sweet nostalgia that made me excited. You said, my mama told me.
The legend of Homie the Clown.
Yes. Can I tell you all about it?
Yes. Tell me everything I need to know.
So first of all, I try to not be on a lot of podcasts because everybody has a podcast. Every single week, people email me and ask me to be in their podcast. I'm so honored and grateful that people want me on their podcast. But if I said yes to all the podcasts, I would literally do nothing else. So I have had like a podcast moratorium for a long time now. But when your producers reached out to me, I said, okay, number one is Langston. I'm a big fan. But more importantly, this is time for me to speak my truth because I have been trying for years to write about this and nobody wants to hear me. Nobody wants to let me write about it. Various publications have reached out and said, oh, Eve, you have any ideas? I'm like, I want to write about Homie the Clown. And they're like, oh, I don't know. They're like, from In Living Color. I'm like, no, it's so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, Langston, you and I are pretty much the same age. We're from the same place. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, Langston is going to be here for me to speak the truth to the people finally about Homie the Clown. And I knew that you would get it. So I'm here to expose the real.
I'm so happy you're doing that. We often get these conspiracy theories that are very like big and sort of like widespread. And this is one that's so Chicago and so specific and local. It's the moo and oink of conspiracy theories. And I can't wait. So please tell the people what they need to know about Homie the Clown. All
right, I'm going to lay it on you. Okay, so first of all, when people hear Homie the Clown, right away, you may be thinking of the iconic character from In Living Color.
Mm-hmm.
Damon Wayans. Right. Yep. And so people are like, yeah, Homie the Clown. But when we were kids, when we were coming up, we were told, I'm assuming without you even confirming that you were also included in this.
Yes. This was a Chicago-wide fact.
And specifically, Chicago-wide Black children, and I think like children of color, I think, because I've also heard this from like Mexican, Puerto Rican homies, like kids of our vintage, we're told when we were kids, you need to watch out for a white van that is driving around Chicago, and Homie the Clown is in it, and he's gonna kidnap you. And there's variations on this theme, so people would say always a white van. There's a white van driving around, and Homie the Clown was not Homie from the TV show, who we all knew and loved. It was someone who had appropriated Homie's name and was using it to do nefarious deeds. There's a dude dressed as a clown. And oftentimes also part of this would be that he had like a sock or a bag full of rocks or nickels, right? So he had like a sock of rocks, and he was going to hit you on the head, and he was going to take you away and kidnap you. And if I may, murder and or molest you. Yes, those were the sort of like ultimate threats. No, you're done. You're done. Yeah. It's over for you. And furthermore, you know, obviously in the skit, in the sketch on In Living Color, that homie also hits people on the head and says, "Homie, don't play that," which is his iconic line. But this homie is bad. So it's like a tethered, like, underworld version of homie. The other homie is good and funny. This homie is bad and scary. Right. This homie keeps little children awake at night, whereas the other one, it kind of becomes a bit that you do at school. Like, ha ha ha. Yes. We all saw that thing in 1991. Right. Fun times. And also this knowledge comes to me, despite the name of the podcast. This knowledge always came to me from older kids, right? And very, very serious, like not older kids trying to scare you, but like older kids really trying to look out for you, right? And they really want you to not get got by homie. And so then fast forward, I became a Chicago public school teacher. And I know you're also a former educator. Yeah. And when I was in Chicago, but you were in high school. So I taught at a school that was 4th grade through 8th grade. And I used to have playground duty, and I taught in the school is a school on the South Side. You know, I taught middle school, but the school went down as low as 4th grade. And I had playground duty, you know, once a week or whatever. And playground duty, you stand around and you talk to the kids that they're not social. I'm trying to be nice in case any of these kids are not listening. They're talking to the teacher. And talk to these dorks. Right. Well, I'm into that because I'm also a dork. And so it would be the kids that like, they're not really trying to play basketball. And so they're kind of like hanging around you to talk to you. And so I used to talk to kids in the morning, and these kids, I overheard them saying, you know, "Miss E, did you know there's a white van going around and there's a clown that is..." Whoa. And this blew me because, you know, this is like years and years later. And homie was never talked about in like the media in the public, except for there's one exception, which I think we'll probably get into in Act 2, I assume. 100%. There's a notable exception here. I too am a researcher, so you know I've like and listen, researcher, you're giving me far more credit than I deserve. I'm a nigga with Google. Well, that's good enough. But for the most part, this isn't a thing that most people know about, right? And so my theory, which is real, some might call it conspiratorial, but I think that there is something about homie that only kids can like see him or access this knowledge. There's something about the culture. There's a children's, because as Black people, we know that like all people, we have folklore, we have culture, right? So we have things that your parents tell you, your grandparents tell you, and it gets passed from generation to generation. Yeah. But people don't talk about homie in adulthood. So what I don't understand is how the transmission would happen between kids in the early 90s and kids in the 2010s, right? How does that happen? You're giving me a lot to unpack here. And I'm listening. About it. I'm excited. Let's start at the base of what you just premised. You're suggesting that there is a almost like mythical kind of quality to homie. That this is, if he is in fact a real sort of like threat, it is not just a threat of a weird dude with a van, but has more of an it kind of quality where it's like kids are at threat and kids can see it better than adults can. Yeah, and only kids. That there's something that happens to you when you pass into adulthood that you can't see homie anymore. And if you think about it, bills. I ain't got time for homie. I'm broke. How am I going to solve my personal problems? Right. Well, I'm thinking about it a little bit like an evil version of like Peter Pan and the Lost Boys type of situation, right? Like there's something where you get too old and you can no longer access homie. Like you can't see him anymore. And maybe homie was never evil. Maybe he was only I don't know, maybe there's something about his relationship to kids that we can't understand as an adult. But I'm very fascinated with him.
You're getting to something that I think is really interesting because this feels pretty understood, but there's no empirical evidence that homie ever took a kid.
Correct.
Right? Like none of us know a kid that got took by the clown.
But everybody knows a kid whose cousin rode the school bus with somebody who used to talk to their friend from down the block who got taken. Right. And that's what's so, I think that like, I'm very interested in my work, not to like be real serious for a second, but I'm very interested in like storytelling and how which stories get told, you know? And so I'm so fascinated by, like, to me, this is a urban quote unquote myth, because is it a myth? We don't know. But if we were to call it an urban myth, it's one that only exists within the culture of children. And we could think about it also, I mean, similar, like the cousin to this, the white people's cousin to this is like Bloody Mary or Resurrection Mary, you know, which like is another Chicago story. And obviously Candyman, the OG as well. Hey. And so there's all these things that specifically kids talk about, but like, I mean, and then the other really obvious thing that we have to mention is that there was a real clown who murdered people, and that was John Wayne Gacy, right?
Right.
So John Wayne Gacy is a white man, though. Yeah. And homie is black.
John Wayne Gacy was a white man, but he killed everybody. He wasn't discriminatory in any kind of way.
No, he
took
not.
them all
he
out.
Was open.
Mostly white boys, but he got everybody. I'm curious to know, because based off of the premise that you set up, are you suggesting then that you do still believe in homie? You just now are unable to see everything that a child is able to see in your belief, if that makes sense.
I believe in homie as much as I believe in America or any other type of mythological abstract concept. Right? So I believe that there are things that humans invent to create sutures that bind together our culture and hold us away from the threat of chaos. And those ideas include things like nationhood, like religion, right? And I believe that homie is in that category. I believe that really, honestly, Langston, homie is the only thing between us and the total like collapse of society. He's the glue. He's the glue that holds children's culture together, and that he does what all great urban myths do, which is there's like a moralistic tale, right? Which is like, you have to watch out. Don't stray too far. Don't stand over by that fence. And the other amazing thing about the homie myth is the white van, right? Because homie always has a white van. Now, white vans are just like everybody, you know, in a city like Chicago, white vans are ubiquitous, right? Yeah. Because a white van is just somebody on their way to do whatever contract work or whatever. And it's also about like in the 80s and 90s, there's all this like stranger danger fear. There's all this like urban, inner city, urban, whatever fear, you know.
There used to be that sticker that they had on every door with the guy in the big trench coat, and you could only see his eyes and the hat. And it's like, he looked like Dick Tracy, but he was meant to be a sign that like, hey, kidnappings happen here.
Kidnappings happen. Watch yourself. You know, Scruff McGruff is on TV at this time. Like everything is about scaring kids out of the idea and scaring kids into compliance by letting them know that criminals are everywhere. Right. But the thing about homie is also that like, it's such a specifically like Black and like Mexican American Chicago thing that I also am curious about. Like, I've never heard white people talk about homie the clown, you know?
Well, that's interesting, because in the little bit of research that I did, and I'm sure yours is much more efficient, but the research that I did, there are a lot of articles that sort of came out of white spaces, basically affirming the same timelines and the same opinions and fears from white kids, suburban kids, like all kinds of communities outside of our own. I do think, I mean, I was a suburban kid, right? Like I grew up in Oak Park. It wasn't as if like I was, and granted, I was tapped into probably a different lexicon, just being Black in Chicago and my mom being, you know, all over the place, whatever. But like, I do think that some of this, just to your point, is allegorical. And therefore it reaches further than even like race and culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's just interesting that like real things that are empirically demonstrably real, like Damon Williams over here, John Wayne Gacy over here, that those things get synthesized into, this mythos of homie that I think is so fascinating. I have to ask you, actually, I've been wanting to ask you, do you feel like in Oak Park were people talking about homie?
It wasn't a constant fear, if that makes sense. I think I've now like grown up and known people who were like on the South Side and they were like, no, we talked about it every day. Like that was like a thing that we were constantly concerned of.
We're vigilant. And this is the other thing is that there's no phones right? There's no phones, there's no screens. Right. So part of this is also like, you're just a kid on the playground. It's 4 degrees outside. Right. Like you're just standing around waiting for the bell to ring. It's like, what is there to discuss?
I truly am, and maybe you'll feel this way, I truly am impressed that my parents kept me alive. Like the amount of times that I was sort of like meant to go home by myself and do things completely alone with no way of contacting me, no way of assuring that I made it safely from point A to point B. The fact that I survived is truly a testament.
Oh, it's miraculous.
Yeah, it's a miracle. And that's why you need a homie the clown. You need somebody to like constantly be like, there is a murdering clown available to take you if you choose to not follow every step that I'm laying out for you.
Right. Whether I'm there or not, because there's no Find My iPhone. There's no GPS. There's none of that, And I got my own key to the crib when I was 7. So, so starting at age 7, it was like, you come in, you let yourself in, and we had neighbors and there's a crossing guard. My mom was always telling me that the crossing guard was watching me, and, but it was like, it was real out here. And so without homie, where would we be, honestly?
Right. We just all kidnapped for less silly reasons. We kidnapped for it's not a clown, it's a grown man who wanted to do something way, I guess the same, but just meaner.
That's right.
Let me ask you this. How many of the people in your life have you shared this theory with, and do you feel like they would support this theory? Or are they going like, Eve, you wildin'. Go write your books, but you acting up.
You out here. Yeah. So I think, sometimes when you are party to a difficult truth, it can be hard to bear the burden, within a generation, to bear the heavy is the head that wears the homie, the clown, as they say. And I think that this is not something I have widely discussed with my loved ones.
Sure.
I have told my husband, that I have these opinions about homie. He's intrigued. He's fascinated. And
is he from Chicago as well?
He's from New Jersey. He's from Newark, New Jersey. So they have their own, they have their own stuff going on out there. But one person I have shared this with, who I believe has been a guest on the podcast, is our dear mutual friend, Nathaniel Armstead Marshall, Nate Marshall. And I told Nate, I'm going on Langston's podcast and I'm going to talk about Homie the Clown. And he was delighted. He was thrilled.
Beautiful.
Because he shares my affinity for hyper local, hyper local content. But yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard when you know something that the rest of the world isn't ready for.
Well, that's
really tough.
I have to imagine is also a hard part of sharing it, is that because it's so localized, there's something almost crazy in that, right? Where like it's like when people argue about fucking hot dogs. Right. And it's like, well, these are the best ones and these ones aren't good, but you don't have a way of communicating why it's the best or what makes it different. It just is. It's just factual in your head. Facts. Yeah. Right. But I didn't experience it. So I don't know. You tripping over mustard? Relax.
It's like the pizza thing. The quote unquote debate really gets on my nerves, because when people are like, oh, Chicago style pizza, it's this, it's that. It's like, Chicagoans, we don't eat deep dish pizza on the regular. Like you're not like Friday night time for some pizza, right? It's like a celebration food. Yeah. It's like a cake. It's like getting a birthday cake. It's not a thing that you eat. We eat tavern style little squares of pizza. That's the true Chicago style pizza that you will not get as a tourist is a little square, and
it's a pizza that gets cut up in 68 squares of tiny little pieces.
Very small squares, and you have to eat 12 pieces to feel like you've had a meal. That's real Chicago style pizza. So I'm like, we're not even entering on the same conversation. And with the matter of homie, the Damon Wayans part makes it complicated because it's weird to say, I'm going to tell you about something. You already have heard this phrase and already know what I'm talking about, but you don't. Right. And then I'm like, and he hits you on the head. They're like, yeah, like Damon Wayans. I'm like, no, it's not the same.
Yeah.
So, it's very complicated. And as I said, I'm very grateful to have the chance to come on the show today and finally tell America the truth about Homie.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that part of what kids are seeing is intentionally being placed there by adults? Because that's part of where I'm trying to make sure that I'm understanding how the allegory exists. Does the allegory merely exist because we morally are sort of checking ourselves as children? Or is that something that adults are intentionally sort of like planting the seed? They can't see it anymore, but a child's imagination allows them to build the world of the white van.
That's such a good question. I think
Thank you. I rehearsed it at home and
no, it was
prepared
excellent.
it.
You're a professional. Okay, so I hope I'm not jumping the gun by bringing this up, but there's this article from probably like 1992 or 1993. And it's a newspaper article in Chicago, and it's about police investigating claims of Homie. Have you seen this article? Do you know this article I'm talking about?
I believe so, but I could be,
So it's from the early 90s, and it's kids were going to their teachers and to their parents and saying, I saw this white van and it's Homie the Clown. And the Chicago Police Department was like, we are taking this seriously. We are looking into it. We have not found any evidence, right?
Yeah.
And I think that moment is funny because it's a moment where like the lore of children crosses over into like actual law enforcement. Again, this is the 90s, is the time of everybody's scared of child abductions. They're trying to take this really seriously. There's a what and a who. And then in the article, they're like reports come from like, Avondale, Inglewood, back of the yards, and Roseland, right? It's like all these places that are like nowhere near each other, right? And it's like, but which is also fascinating because on the one hand, it's kind of a tell that like maybe this story isn't quite what it seems to be, because most child abductors, I'm just talking because I actually don't want to talk about, but I assume that most child abductors are not driving like literally all over the city
that's
of Chicago.
Gas money. I'm
about to say, those places are bad. You're driving a 1984 Chevy Astro.
Right? You can find enough murderable kids within the 5 city blocks that you
go to
in.
one playground. You go to the one playground where the teacher's aide like has to take a smoke break every 2 minutes. You're not going to drive from North Lawndale,
not at all.
to Pullman to find some kids. So anyway, to answer your actual question, I think that the role of like the older kid is really important here, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the kid who is like 10, 11, 12, 13, right?
Yeah.
When you're 5 or 6 or 7, that kid is old, right?
Yep.
And so that kid is also still a kid. And so they're very susceptible to like hearing and perhaps misunderstanding information. So I think that adults were saying scary things around kids, and that the older kid who was kind of like in this interwoven space between the young and the old, right? Between the childhood and adulthood, that they're the ones who kind of transpose this into the realm of myth, which they then bring as a cautionary tale dutifully to their younger brethren.
I really like that. I think it hits home for me in a way that I'm the oldest of 5, but I'm substantially older than all of my siblings. The next in line is 10 years younger than I am.
Oh, wow.
And so in that way, I know that there's like a lot of mythology that I probably handed down to my siblings that they then took as fact, even though it was just me being a kid and having my own fears and traumas that I'm attempting to unpack or figure out in front of them. But it's like, no, I'm technically an authority figure. And now I'm giving you this information, and that becomes permanent in you, and you pass it down maybe to a kid younger than you, and blah, 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 blah.
On the kindergarten playground. Exactly.
Yeah. And so Homie lives forever.
Right. Homie lives forever. I used to ride the bus to school. And riding the school bus is also where a lot of knowledge is like shared among kids, because there's no supervision. There's one adult, right? There's one adult and like 40 kids. And it's not a good adult. It's not. It's a bus driver. So they're trained to drive a bus. They're not trained to, manage kids. And if they were, they're in this position where like physically they can't see any of the kids. Right. And they're also literally driving a bus through the streets of Chicago. And so the other thing about the school bus for me is that I went to a magnet school. And so the school I went to was very racially and socioeconomically diverse. But then your bus is based on where you live, right? And so the bus people is like the people who are from your neighborhood. And they know your business. They know that one time, your parents push you out and you didn't have, they know everything about you and your situation and where you live and what your building looks like and what your block looks like and all of that stuff. And it's a totally aged, right? It's kindergarten through 8th grade. My school bus was kindergartners through 8th graders all on one bus.
Yeah.
And so, that's where a lot of knowledge gets shared.
And I will say, it sounds to me like that also is how that knowledge sort of cross-pollinates with communities that otherwise would not have had it.
Right, exactly.
You're snitching to these other magnet school kids
exactly.
who then take it to their neighborhood that's very far from where you live. And now we all got homie. When we previously maybe did not in our brains.
Even if you think about like the way a conversation happens on a school bus is that there's two people sitting next to each other talking, right? Or maybe you're talking across the aisle to your friend, or you're talking to your friend who sits next to you on the bus. And then there's other kids listening through like a leather seat, and you can't see each other. Like the more I think about it, the more of a extremely bizarre social experiment this is because, and also when we were kids, it was like, you did not wear a seatbelt. None of us wore seatbelts.
Do they wear seatbelts now? Is that like something telling
they
kids
have
to do?
them. Well, I've been a chaperone. I've chaperoned some field trips and sometimes they do have the kids wearing the seatbelts now. Yeah. It's wild out here,
man.
But they're also those type of old, they're not full seatbelts that go across the front of you. So it's the kind of seatbelt that might cut you in half.
Metal and leather strap.
Yeah. And it might save your life, but it also might bisect your entire body.
I was going to say, it's probably going to
might slice
cut you in half if this dude stops too slow.
Right.
Wow.
Anyway.
All right. Well, we're going to take another break and we'll be back with more Eve Ewing.
No.
Ewing and more My Mama Told Me. And we are back.
Like teenage girls. When you say teenage, how old are we talking?
Yeah, we're back here with more Eve Ewing, more My Mama Told Me.
Oh my God, I'm grimacing. I'm grimacing at the R. Kelly. You're wrong for that.
We're still talking about Homie the Clown, the legend of Homie the Clown, be him real or fake, and certainly the massive effect it had on our childhoods and the childhoods that followed many years later.
You got me thinking about R. Kelly now and the way that R. Kelly is related to Homie the Clown, and I'm so disturbed.
Uh-oh. Tell me about this connection.
Well, because part of it is like the thing about, so we were already talking about like all myths exist as cautionary tales against real threats, right? And so we tell ourselves, we tell kids, we tell people in our society about mythological pseudo-real things as a controllable way to warn them about real things. And, R. Kelly really was out here, right, preying on young people. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just thinking about, and using schools as a space to do that. So I'm just thinking about, I don't know, that's just like a bizarre connection. And I'm also thinking about the fact that R. Kelly tried to have his laptop while he was incarcerated and said he was going to make music.
Hey, come on, my man got to make beats. You can't take that.
And then how that woman who was a preschool teacher posted all that money to bail him out, and I never stop being upset about R. Kelly. He's so upsetting.
I do think that at a certain point we just have to settle into the fact that like what is done, and hopefully now finally some version of justice gets served. But I am especially interested in what you're saying about the way that like these myths take on a form. And so, and maybe even transfer forms, that in some ways, Homie the Clown is R. Kelly, right? That like, we are afraid that your kids get snatched or that you could be taken away. And instead of facing the actual monster, which is the dude that's singing on the radio, we create a mythical one that, has a big clown
that's more controllable. Right. And if anything, like the figure of somebody like Homie the Clown also lets somebody like R. Kelly do what he does. Because if you think that what a child abduction looks like is that a dude in a clown suit is going to jump out of a van and hit you in the head with some rocks, right? Then you are less. And I think that is still like when it comes to sexual assault and like kidnapping in our country, that's what a lot of people think it is. They think it's most likely to be a stranger jumping out of a bush. And those things do happen, but it's just not as common as,
it's far more
the
common.
dude who tricks you.
Yeah, or somebody that you know very well.
Exactly.
Or has been
a
very
partner,
intimate.
a family member.
Yeah.
All of that. So anyway, I'm sorry I've ruined your comedy podcast, but you did it. You brought R. Kelly into it, so that was your fault.
No, this is my fault, and I made mistakes, and I got to own up to that. Let's get into this research. I think that one of the things that you've hit on all the important parts, that it's around 1991 that this sort of figure starts to emerge, Homie the Clown, and largely it becomes connected to the In Living Color character from Damon Wayans, but a much more sinister version. One of the things that I ended up finding was that there was basically a shit ton of media that in 1991, 1992-ish that started to at least try to address the thing. And to your point, it becomes this really fascinating thing where it's similar to the way that like the FBI eventually had to just acknowledge that everybody was saying Melania wasn't the real Melania.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
they have to answer. It rises to the level that it has to be addressed.
It has to be addressed.
By the way, that is not the real Melania. I'm just going to that is not Melania. That is the Melania bot 2020. That's all I have to say about that.
All right. Well, Melania bot 2020. That's who I'm voting for next time. But I will say that like it's that same energy, right? Of
right.
So many people are talking about this. It's so widespread. So many children are being haunted by it that we're starting to see it in the media. So on October 9th, 1991, WFLD TV ran a 30-second news
Fox
spot.
32.
There you go. Saying that the police were treating Homie the Clown as an urban legend, which while they're denying it, they're also acknowledging like, hey, that shit you're scared of is legit in some sense.
Right. In that the police have to release a statement about it.
Exactly. And then 2 days later, the Chicago Tribune ran an article called Police Taking Clown Sightings Seriously.
Which is the opposite.
Where they're completely disrupting the attempt the police made to be like, no, this bullshit.
Isn't real. Right.
We're not dealing with it. But then the Chicago Tribune was like, I don't know. These motherfuckers look like they taking it seriously to me. And then my beautiful hometown on October 16th, Oak Park, in their Wednesday journal ran the headline, Police Dismissed Youth Sightings of Deviant Clown as Unfounded.
Wait,
So
read that headline again. Youth sightings specifically? Yeah, see, this is deep. This is deep.
Police dismiss youth sightings of deviant clowns as unfounded.
What an amazing headline.
So they're like, these kids, that shit's unfounded.
Right. They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Wow. Deviant clown. All the other clowns, totally. The clowns that are on the straight and narrow, very real.
Yeah.
Deviant clown, false.
Well, it's so funny that you should bring that up because I read a few things that sort of talk about the fallout that came with Homie the Clown for all of the other clowns around town in Chicago.
Not the clowns around town.
Exactly.
They had a frown. They were feeling down.
Listen, they didn't like any of the rhymes. They were very upset with what was happening. There's a
happening on the ground. Sorry. I'm in for a penny. I'm in for a pound. Okay, I'm done.
All right, get it all out. Just get it all out.
Those are all the rhymes.
Okay, here we go. There's a quote from this dude, Cleo the Clown, who was a longtime clown in Chicago, apparently very reputable, very respected.
Not deviant.
Not deviant at all, at least, by his own claims. Who knows what Cleo the Clown is doing in his personal time. But he said, I do remember kind of a rise, especially in Black and Latino neighborhoods, of backlash and negative response. It was discrimination against clowns in general. People crossed the street when they saw him coming and called him names, including Homie.
Oh, no, this is so sad. Poor Cleo. He was discriminated against. He said it was Now, so Cleo the Clown is a black clown, I'm presuming?
Black clown, that's right.
Okay, so he said it's discrimination against clowns in general. Oh, this is so sad. Wow.
Well, it is sad.
The fallout.
It is sad, but then it gets funnier and sadder because he goes on to say, I used to say, Homie the Clown carries the stock, right? I carry a Louisville Slugger. I'd say, I'm not Homie. I'm Homie's older brother. I'm from the hood. Homie's not from the hood. How far do you think Homie would get on your block before people would take that sock and beat him with it? It's like,
Stop.
Cleo.
Stop.
I don't know what your
don't
argument
protest
is
too
here.
much. Right. Cleo, what exactly? So Cleo started out being like, it's really sad how people are scared of me because they think that clowns beat each other, which I totally will do.
Yeah.
If you cross me, I will beat you with a baseball bat.
He was like, listen, I hit you
Wow.
with something way harder than a sock. It's a bat.
Right. It sounds like Cleo has different beef and he's not quite willing to admit it, but it sounds like Cleo's real beef is that he feels like he got swagger jacked a little bit by, like he feels like homie is biter and he feel like he's the OG hood clown, right? Like hood clown has been his identity and he had to sacrifice to cultivate that identity. He had to be out here at these backyard parties, you know, for years, putting in work. Maybe risking being mugged from time to time, carrying his Louisville Slugger to protect himself. Maybe Cleo, cut somebody from time to time as needed, or just, let the threat of cutting somebody be a presence in his interactions. And he did all that work just for Damon Wayans to ride off the coattails of his family name, get on television and claim the mantle of hoodedest clown, clown around town. And Cleo he's not here for that. So I think that Cleo is, at that point, it was personal for him.
I love what you're saying. I've always maintained this.
Cleo, if you're listening, I support you. I'm sorry for what happened.
I think that Chicago is a city filled with haters in the most beautiful, majestic way that a hater can be.
True.
We really are a bunch of haters.
Yes,
and I think
haters.
that Cleo's exactly that. He's seeing Damon Wayans get off on a character that he's fucking perfected for years. And this dude's doing it as a throwaway for a 3-minute sketch. Right. He's bitter and he's angry, and then it becomes fucking violent. Now
I'm losing work. I'm losing work off of this. Yeah, no, it's so real. And for a Chicagoan, the number one insult is, he ain't even from Chicago. You ain't even from here. He ain't even from here. So how you gonna be? He's not even. He ain't even. Where he's from? Winnetka and whatnot. Like, so that's rough. I'm sorry. Tough look for my guy Cleo. Cleo, if you're listening, I hope you're still clowning.
Shout out to Cleo.
Shout out to Cleo the clown.
So one of the things that I became particularly interested in, and you sort of brought this up earlier about the weird relationship that Chicago has with clowns, right? So first we have the Bozo Show.
Bozo, a Chicago original.
Chicago original, goes from 1960 to 2001. If ever you wanted to watch kids throw balls in a cup in the morning,
this is it.
You could watch Bozo and his homies do that every single morning. And so that's a kind, sweet relationship in some ways that we have Bozo with clowns. But then we also have John Wayne Gacy, who murders 33 young men and boys, and then basically buries
in the 70s, though, right?
In the 70s, that's right. But one of the things that is argued in terms of, I started to think about why a clown? And this goes to your mythology of it all. Why are we picking a clown? And where is this fear of clowns coming from? And there are plenty of people who argue that this sort of active fear of clowns that exists today is born in the 70s from the Stephen King novels and the John Wayne Gacy and
deep.
All these other parts, right?
That's really deep. I want to say shout out to Bozo. I love Bozo. Mm-hmm. Bozo, I used to watch Bozo every morning before school. And when it was time for the grand prize game, that's when I knew it was time to go catch the school bus.
Oh, it was like a timing.
Yeah, no, not the grand prize game, the grand march. So after the grand prize game, which we just call Bozo buckets, right? Which is just throwing a ball into a bucket. Then there's the grand march, which is the closing parade where Bozo and all his friends march around the TV set, and all the kids who've been in the audience get in the parade and they march around. Yeah. And it's so funny to me because I feel like a lot of people, obviously everybody knows Krusty the Clown, right? But Krusty is Bozo, right? It's the idea of the kids in the audience. I think a lot of people don't know that is a Chicago thing. It was WGN. It was nationally syndicated, right? Yep. And as you said, it ran all this time. So I love Bozo. And Bozo buckets, this game of standing behind a line and trying to throw a ball into a bucket. Going back to my time as a teacher, this was also something we would do at every field day, at every, at birthday parties. Oh. It would be what games are we going to play? We're going to play tug of war. We're going to play kickball. We're going to play, 16-inch softball, and we're going to do Bozo buckets. We got to do Bozo buckets. You got to do Bozo buckets. And then the other thing I want to say about Bozo is that I was in the audience of the Bozo show when I was in kindergarten.
Okay.
And we got to go sit. My mom knew a guy who knew a guy, and we got to sit in the audience and watch the Bozo show.
Did you didn't make it onto the...
I did not make it onto the grand prize game. It was a Halloween show, and so I was wearing a Halloween costume. I was Batgirl.
Nice.
And which was a pair of footy pajamas that my mother had sewed a yellow Batman logo onto.
I was very comfortable back then.
It was great. And a Zorro mask, and I had a Zorro mask. That was my costume. It was like these pajamas, a mask, and a Batman logo. Because, the Tim Burton Batman had just come out like 2 years prior.
Right.
So I was killing the game.
Yeah.
I was riding a wave. I was Batgirl for like 4 years. I love that costume.
I'm not mad at that. That's beautiful.
So I got to meet Bozo, and I don't remember anything from the show other than the grand march at the end. And I remember that my mom tried to tell Bozo like who their mutual friend was, and she was trying to talk to him while the show was happening, and I was embarrassed by that. So
your mom heckled Bozo.
No, she was trying to be like, hey, Bozo, like you and me, like when people are trying to tell you, oh, Langston, I went to, you don't know me, but, your cousin.
Right, but this nigga's at work. He ain't trying to process all that.
On a camera is rolling. Right?
Yeah.
So, so I remember being like kind of embarrassed by that, and that's the main thing I remember from the show. But it was iconic. It's an iconic moment in my childhood, and I have a lot of love for Bozo.
Extremely iconic show, especially I think for Chicago kids who had a TV to watch in the morning before they had to get on a bus or go to school.
Right, and be cold.
I think it's a fascinating turn of clowns where in 1960 clowns are cute. And then suddenly make this transformation. Now, there are researchers who say that the bad clown mythology actually goes all the way back to ancient Greece. That like there used to be, and that these ancient Grecian clown people actually influenced like the court jesters and the Harlequin characters that followed years later. And they even point to, in the 1500s, the conception of Punch, the clown puppet.
Oh, yeah, like Punch and Judy.
Exactly, who used to beat his lady Judy over the head with a stick.
Much so that was his whole name. He was named after what he did.
What he did to the woman that he spent all his time with. No, right. I don't think Punch is making it through the Me Too movement.
No, Punch is a bad clown. We're going to have an infographic on Instagram after the show of good clowns and bad clowns. R. Kelly, bad clown. Punch, bad clown.
Bozo, good.
Bozo, good. Good clown. Good clown.
Krusty,
Krusty is in between. Krusty proves that there's truly no borders in life.
That's satire. We can chalk that up to satire.
Right. Wow, that's crazy.
This is where I think it gets even more interesting, because you started to talk about how your students were still actively sort of living in this mythology even years after.
Yeah. And how did they get it? Where did they hear it from?
Well, it's an interesting, because I don't know if you remember this, but in 2016, there became like this nationwide resurgence of creepy clowns, right?
Yes.
Like 2016, people all over the country, really, Chicago being a place where it was happening a lot, and partly because of that Homie the Clown sort of legend. But people dress up as creepy clowns and go stand in the woods, in parking lots, sometimes driving cars and threatening people, or at least making people massively uncomfortable.
I totally forgot about that. I mean, partially because a lot else was happening.
Sure. Wait, that wasn't the biggest issue of 2016?
Right, 2016. People, I forgot about that. And you know what? A lot of that. So I've never seen or read it. And so I always I obviously know Pennywise, the character, but I'm always a little bit, it's always a little bit above my head when people, and then I also, Langston, can I tell you the real secret? I actually really like clowns.
Whoa.
I really
Hold
like
on.
clowns.
I'm going to stop you right there.
So that's how they get you.
That's how they get you. No, thank you.
I really like clowns. And so I think that whenever people are like, oh, clowns are scary, clowns are this, I'm always like, yeah, but I actually really like clowns. I think clowns are fun and funny. And it's good that they shut down Ringling Brothers, because they had those elephants living in New York apartments and whatnot, with no space. But that's not good. But I used to love to go see the clowns, and I love the Universal Circus, and I just think clowns are funny. I don't know. I'm just a kind of a loser.
So you see a creepy clown, one of these resurged creepy clowns standing somewhere, and you're not haunted? This doesn't haunt your nightmares?
I mean, those clowns are intentionally very frightening. But I think that I think that it's a little sad in our society. I think I agree with Cleo here. You know, our man's Cleo is that like, I think it's a little sad that it used to be that like clowns. Most people were like clowns, good. And then a minority of people were like, I have a clown phobia, or I really have a thing with clowns, which was okay, fine. People have all type of phobias.
Mm-hmm.
I have an aunt who is deathly, I'm not even kidding with this, very serious. Like she has a deep phobia of paper clips.
Whoa.
Which is like and if you ask her about it, she says it's like the way they are shaped is very disturbing to her. And when I was a kid, I used to think it was really fun to like torment her about this. And then as an adult, I realized this was like a literal, very real phobia, right? So people have all type of phobias, and it used to be that it was like most people were like clowns are good, but some people were like, oh, clowns, I have a clown phobia. Now I feel like the idea that clowns are creepy or bad is more like the default in our pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
And when a lot of people think about or talk about clowns now, that's like where they go to. Now, granted, I don't like go to a lot of children's birthday parties. And so maybe there's a corner of the world where clowns are still A-okay. But I think clowns have really taken a hit.
Yeah, I don't actually know that. I certainly know adults in my life, and we're both at an age where like we have friends and family who have children and are like raising full families. And
I never see a picture of like, here's my kid's second birthday, I got them a clown.
Yeah, I don't think that culture exists anymore. And I think part of that might come from like this constant fear that we have now about like bringing strange adults around children.
Right. Which is going to be after COVID even more of a thing.
Yeah. Like literally nobody that isn't tested and blood related is probably ever going to meet a child that I raised. But like,
but people still go to Santa. People still take kids and they put their kid on a stranger's lap. And
which
maybe
rarely
that needs to be clowns.
Works out in a good way. Like
no,
most of those pictures are kids crying
screaming,
or feeling traumatized by the experience.
I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, y'all really getting these viral photos off and your kid is like scarred for life. No, I think like clowning is it's hundreds of years old as an art form. And I think it is actually really sad. I think that clowns need a resuscitated campaign. I think that people need to be reminded of the good clowns, not the homies, and the many hardworking clowns all across this world who are really just trying to bring lighthearted spirit. Although, can I tell you a bad clown story?
Yes, please.
Okay, so a few years ago, so my niece, she was probably like maybe 3 years old. And my mom was like, let's go to the Universal Circus, right? Mm-hmm. And which is really fun. You got to go every couple years. It's wild, right?
It's as much a party as it is a circus.
It's ridiculous. It's a circus in a different type of way, right? So we go to the circus, and my niece is like, I want to take a picture with a clown. And I'm like, okay. Now, I don't know the last time you've been to the Universal Circus recently.
Not since I was a child.
A lot of the clowns are essentially bucket boys with like a wig on.
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so a lot of the clowns, like they're just kids who can
I gotta stop you because we got to translate something.
Okay, bucket boys.
Bucket boys. Explain to the listeners what that is.
So a bucket boy in Chicago is a young person, almost always a boy, a young man, who is on a corner and who is raising money by performing like drumming on buckets.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them are super, super good and super talented, and it's really hard. And they do this drumming really fast, and they get money for doing that. But like, I guess what I'm saying is a lot of the clowns at the Universal Circus, they're basically like, they look like kind of like around the way boys.
Mm-hmm. It's niggas. It's niggas in clown makeup.
And they can dance. And they have the bare minimum makeup, and they have a wig on. So those clowns are cool. My niece was like, I was like, okay, which clown? Let's go take a picture. And then she's like, that one. And she points to the most, I'll send you a picture of this after this is over. The most grimiest, scariest, perviest, sketchiest looking clown I have ever seen in my life. And he wasn't one of the like young dancers. He was just, I was actually like, is this just a dude who's snuck in the circus?
He just got on red lipstick, smoking a cigarette with a limp.
It was terrifying. Super scary. And I was like, what about a different clown? She's like, no, that clown. And so I go down and I was like, sir, can we take a picture with you? He's like, absolutely. So my niece looks like me, right? She's obviously, it's like, she looks like she could be my daughter. And so I'm holding her on my hip, and we take this selfie. And he leans all into me unnecessarily. And then he looks at my niece and he goes, tell your mommy I'm going to be your new daddy.
Jesus Christ.
And I was like, Okay,
Holy
go. We're gonna go now. It was so terrifying, and I was like, and she didn't really hear. He said it to me, but he was looking at her.
Yeah.
But obviously, he was talking to me. I was like, my worst fears about this clown were absolutely confirmed. And the thing about
I can't tell you how much I hope that was Cleo the clown. I hope with
leave
all
Cleo
of my
out
heart.
of this, Langston. Leave him out of this. Leave him. But it was so crazy because, like, as we were walking down there, I was like, Eve, you are prejudiced against this clown. Like, you are judging him just because, his particular makeup doesn't look as good as other clowns. He's just out here trying to make a living. And then in our 4-second interaction, he was like, how can I maximize the creepy predatory nature of this interaction, right? So
he was like, if we taking a picture, baby girl, let's talk about it.
Let's do it. Let's get it done. Right. Let's get on with the get on. So, but I still maintain my positive clown.
I think it's beautiful, and I think it's impressive given this how little good news is coming out from clowns. I'll hit you with a little bit more research on this, but apparently after the 2016 resurgence, a number of like media outlets then decided that the year later they would like preemptively write a bunch of articles warning people about the possibility of the killer clowns showing back up in various places. So much so that the following year someone actually gets murdered because they're doing the killer clown shit, pretending to be an evil clown, and somebody in New Jersey just stabs the shit out of them in like self-defense from what possibly could be like a mortal threat.
See, here's my thing. I have a rule in life. I don't do anything where if I die in the process of doing it, my parents are going to have to be embarrassed to explain my death for the rest of their life. This is a rule that I live by. When I'm about to do something, people are like, Eve, you want to go, da da da, I'm like, if I get killed and people say to my mother for the next, whatever her natural lifespan is, right? Decades. She got decades to go. Knock on, right? Prayers up.
Yep.
Oh my God, your daughter? Oh, that's so sad. What happened to her? Oh, she was dressed as a clown at a gas station in Hillside, New Jersey, and she got stabbed because she thought it was funny to run up on somebody trying to make a vine.
Right. Was she making money? No, she just loved the character.
Just thought it was funny to try to make, viral videos on the internet. I try really hard not to put myself in that situation to bring shame to my family. R.I.P. to that person, though. It's
very
wild.
sad. And there are a couple other incidents where violence sort of transpires because of these kinds of situations. But it made me think how much of this is rooted in sort of like the response to Homie. So hear me out. I think that there's a possibility that a bunch of kids grew up like us hearing this legend of Homie the Clown, particularly white children, are hearing this legend of Homie the Clown in their own communities.
At basketball camp. They go to basketball.
Not necessarily feeling the threat that young black kids felt in the way that, because it's not as scary when you truly aren't out walking the street having to get yourself to and from a place independently. And so then they grow up and they go, you know what would be funny? If I was Homie the Clown. If I was the threat. And then they go out and dress up as the thing and become the haunting thing that was sort of born from our own brains, if you will.
Yo, that is so deep and so real. Because the thing is, like, the other very serious backdrop of it for us is that, when you're a black kid, you also really do know that you could get kidnapped and nobody is like, you won't get found.
Right.
Right. And so like there's stories in the news about black kids that really do go missing.
Yeah.
And you are not going to be on the cover of USA Today. You are not going to be.
You ain't even getting on the milk, big boy.
No, right.
Missing.
You got milk money. You're just gone. And so it's really like, and like you said, also, if you're a latchkey kid during this time, if you're just a kid who has to be in your neighborhood, you also know that there really are scary people that you actually do have to navigate on a daily basis, that you really have to learn those skills. And so it's really not funny as a kid, right? And your theory, like, it plays so well to me because there's so many other things like that. I have a colleague who's a sociologist in Washington, and he writes about this as the phenomenon of living the wire. So he writes about like white people in DC who will move to certain neighborhoods in DC, and they'll tell him like, oh yeah, like somebody got shot on my block this week. But they say it in this like kind of hushed tone of excitement, right? Whereas black residents are like, I'm actually very afraid of gun violence. And so I think that's just like so deep. It also reminds me of being at the protest And like the way like certain white people will run up on police and just be like, yeah, duh. And you're just like, okay, buddy. All right. Like, I'm not trying to die today.
Right.
Like,
this motherfucker still got a gun.
right.
Relax.
Come on now. Like, and so, yeah, that's so real to me, though. It's like literally putting on a costume of something that for us is like a mortal fear. That's deep.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's heavy and it's sad, but it also good. If that's the person that gets stabbed, I'm okay with it. I'll make peace.
Well, I still hope that some clowns are listening to this and take my advice that we need a pro clown movement in this country. And it's time for clowns to take back.
Take back the clown.
Take back your culture.
You deserve it. Take back your culture, you idiots. And also, don't walk around in public with the makeup on. Maybe just show up at the place and then get dressed in the bathroom.
But you can't. No, that's even worse. You have to show up as the clown at the party. You can't show up and be like, "Can I please use your washroom?"
Hey, I'm James. Can I get in the bathroom real quick?
Or worse, you're changing in the van. it's all bad.
No, that's way
You know what? Maybe clowns are a thing of the past.
Yeah, maybe it's just a dead world.
Maybe it's just a thing that used to be and is no more. I don't know.
You heard it here first. First we were rooting for you. Now we're saying your job is defunct. Sorry,
it's a cold
clowns.
world. It's a cold world.
All right, we're going to take one more break. We'll be back with more Eve Ewing, more My Mama Told Me. And we are back.
We're not going to let Joe Biden and Kamala Harris cut America's meat.
That's dead on that. That's dead on that.
Yeah, we're back here with
Did he say cut America's meat?
It was like during the
Okay.
phase when Mike Pence was like going places and trying to reassure Americans that by voting.
Whenever you hear Mike Pence talk, I'm like, I have no idea who that is because he don't be talking.
That's my boy Mike Pence. That's
Indiana's
creepy.
own. Indiana's own.
He's got his own little weird molestation
He's so weird.
vibe.
You know what? I heard this podcast where they said that when Mike Pence they were trying to convince 45 to pick Mike Pence as a VP.
Yeah.
He was like, no, because he has too many pets. Like somehow, like Trump thought it was like very low class that a person would have like multiple pets. Mike Pence has like a family, and he's like kind of I guess like a pretty normal Indiana human,
Yeah, except for the electrocuting gay people.
I said normal Indiana human. Indiana. I'm sorry to the state of Indiana, but you know what?
Hey, y'all
better. Y'all have to own your situation.
Y'all got something to unpack.
I'm from Chicago. I hear people say bad stuff about where I'm from all day, every day. The Indiana people, you just have to take it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You'll get no judgment over here. All right, let's play a game. This is a fun game that I like to call White Lies.
Ugly, you're disgusting. I'm going to kill you. Give me $200.
White Lies. It's a fun game in which I'm going to introduce to you a widely believed white conspiracy theory, one that was spreading in the white community. And what I would love for you to do, Eve, is unpack where you think this conspiracy comes from. And more importantly, why do you think the white man believes in it? What are these sneaky motherfuckers up to?
I'm here for this.
Here we go. This is a fun one. And it's actually somewhat new to me, although it makes sense how this would happen. But there were arguments back during, and you'll remember this, that the ice bucket challenge was in fact really a satanic ritual.
Oh my God.
That this was a mass trick to get a bunch of people to follow through with the satanic ritual and basically welcome the devil back to the earth.
Did I miss a step 2 there? Is there, it's like step 1.
No, not really. It was basically
okay.
It was like
That's it.
Basically like a move towards homage, really towards like human sacrifice. That by us all participating in it, it was a satanic ritual that would like merge us with the devil and devilish things.
Of course,
yeah,
makes perfect sense.
Anyway, my question for you: why do you think the whites believe in this one?
Oh, I already know. Okay, the reason is because first of all, the ice bucket challenge, ridiculous. I hope you, it was just on my head because I was doing a crossword puzzle yesterday.
Yeah.
Where the answer was ALS and it was like disease helped by the ice bucket challenge. So literally 24 hours ago, I thought about the ice bucket challenge for the first time in years. Okay. Here's what the ice bucket challenge is really about.
Yep.
There is a thing where when you live a life of privilege and comfort, you want to bring unnecessary and bizarre torment, physical torment into your life to experience a thrill, right? To feel something, anything.
Yep.
Right. And so I think that like a lot of white suburban people were dumping ice all over their bodies as a way of like feeling something.
Yeah.
After like basically deadening their senses and their empathy for human suffering in the rest of their lives and not having everyday risks, right?
Yeah.
The fear of death that that we all fear like every time we go outside. So now the thing about feeling something is like there's a kind of puritanical root to white American culture that wants people to, that goes back to literally the Puritans and early, folks that consider themselves settlers of this country that were actually engaging in violent settler colonialism. Yeah. And their religious practice is also about like deadening the senses, right? And so the idea is if you feel too much, that is inherently devilish.
Whoa.
It's really just about like there's this idea that to feel anything is devilish, right?
Yeah.
That the idea of feeling emotion or sensation, right? Like related to sex, related to joy, related to anything that's like hedonistic or devilish.
Yeah.
And so I think that it is the puritanical origins of white American culture that makes people susceptible to the idea that dumping ice all over your skin and the thrill that it presents is somehow satanic in nature.
God
That's my
damn.
psychoanalysis of that.
Oh, shit. Hold on.
That's called motherfucking bars, nigga. You know nothing about that.
Oh, man. You just hit something. That was great. I'll say this. You hit a few things that really make a lot of sense for me. Number one, just the instinct of the ice bucket challenge. Like, I think the original conception was somebody saying that this was the closest you could get to the feeling of ALS, of like.
See, I don't even know because there's none of these people want to even talk about that.
And that's what, to your point, that's what makes it so complicated, right? Is that it's conceived with like empathy in mind, and then a bunch of people skirt the empathy. They remove the pictures of the people suffering from the disease. They don't ever really even connect some of the links to remind people to pay for the shit or help pay for the shit. They just are pouring buckets of ice on themselves to numb the feelings. And in doing so, they are, quote unquote, doing, or rather the argument would be a satanic ritual because everybody's wincing and feeling something.
Yeah, it's shocking. And you feel thrill.
Yeah.
You feel anxiety. You feel anticipation. All those things are like very forbidden feelings.
Yeah.
Right? Very devilish and satanic feelings through this worldview. And it's also like, anytime you say, I'm doing this to quote unquote bring awareness to something, that's how you know what you're doing is fake.
Nah.
If your whole plan is bring awareness, you need a new plan.
Yeah, we're aware. We're internet aware. Exists. We're aware. Do something else. Right.
Wow.
Well,
I forgot about that.
This was beautiful. Eve, you did a beautiful job, and this was a great episode. Could you tell the kind people at home where they can find you and what cool stuff you got going on?
Why, sure. Thank you so much. So you can find me on Instagram at eve.ewing, Ewing, on Instagram. I am still technically on Twitter, but I don't really be on there like that. But my Twitter name is Eve Ewing, and I go by the name of Wikipedia Brown, which some people think is my government name, which is very funny. Those people, not smart people. And I have my next book that's coming out. I have a book coming out in July. It's a book for kids. So if you want to read something to your kids that doesn't involve clowns, you can check out my book for children called Maya and the Robot, which is coming out in July. And you can read my Marvel comic books. That's about it. And you won't see me on the street because it's COVID times and I'm staying in my crib. So.
Hell yeah. Read Eve's books. She's great. This was a great time. And as always, follow me at Langston Kerman. And please, if you want to send us stuff, you can send it to mymommapod@gmail.com. I would love to hear all of your thoughts, your nonsense, your drops, whatever the fuck you can send me. I ain't got nothing else going on, so send it to me. All right. Get the fuck out of here. Bye.
Money.